Well, let's take a look at this morning's papers, and here to review them is Dawn Neeson, former editor of the Daily Star, and Shona Craven, community editor and columnist at the Scottish newspaper The National. Thank you both for being with us. Dawn, let me start with you. Page 12 of the Times. So, infighting wipes out PM's gains in less than 24 hours. So, tax cuts on the one hand, migration.
This was, I mean, it's really, I mean, politics is just insane at the moment, isn't it, across the world? But this is, we had obviously the autumn statement where the big grand gesture was 2p cut in national insurance, 10 billion for businesses, especially small businesses. All sounds brilliant, but they are also taking it away with the stealth taxes. But we'll leave that one there. The very next day, Barbara, 9:30 the next day, we had the migration figures. And basically, the Tories were feeling good. They got a little boost in the polls against Labour, and then the very next day they completely lost it. So basically, it's just triggered the infighting again. It's like, you know, the migration figures were terrifying, if you want to put it that way. 745,000 for last year, roughly the population of Leeds. Over the past 2 years, 1.3 million, which is the same as Birmingham. And sort of like, and even though Rishi Sunak actually sacked Suella Braverman, Robert Jenrick has just taken, the immigration minister, has just literally taken over a role and is sticking to her hardline dogma, which is causing problems with his new boss, James Cleverly, who is also creating problems for himself, as we know, with having to go in various parts of our country. So it's just a mess going. It's the infighting. It's once again, you've got the Home Office, the Foreign Office, the Prime Minister. No one's singing from the same hymn sheet.
Speaking of that, Shona, Dawn just mentioned James Cleverly, so let's look at the front page of the Times. Rwanda plan is not the be and end all, says Cleverly.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, I don't necessarily find the immigration figures terrifying. I think when you dig into the immigration figures, you actually see that we're talking about students, we're talking about NHS workers coming to Britain, but obviously the focus of the Tories has been on stopping the boats. And what's interesting in what Cleverly is saying, now obviously he has moved to the Home Office from the Foreign Office, which is maybe significant. He's saying that we don't want to jeopardise the key cooperation we have with international partners working to curb, you know, people being put on these boats, and therefore his position is that he does not want to leave the European Convention on Human Rights in order to facilitate methods that the Tories want to take. And also, you could argue inside the paper, he talks in a lot more detail about his aims in his new role. There's not explicitly shade at Suella Braverman, his predecessor, but he does say he wants to put actions before rhetoric. He says, I'm not focused quite so much on describing the problem as I am going to spend time dealing with it. And this is when he's been asked about references to a hurricane and an invasion of immigration. It's clear he's trying to step away from that and presenting himself, rightly or otherwise, we'll find out, as a rational problem solver who's not saying, I'm going to stop the boats by doing X or Y. He's actually going to use diplomacy and use working with other countries to try and stop people from coming to begin with. Yeah. There is the whole question of Rwanda that he has inherited, but I'm not surprised that he's focusing on that not being the be-all and end-all, because it might not ever happen. So, you know, if you focus too much on that, then you're going to line yourself up for potential failure.
We've actually sent more Home Secretary to Rwanda than we have migrants. I mean, it's just insane.
Let's look at the Mail, page 7. Black Friday splurge to hit £8.7 billion. Black Friday, of course, yesterday, although it tends to be Black Weekend.
It's Black Month, actually, isn't it? Have you been shopping yet, Barbara? That's
and do you know, I haven't actually. No, actually, that's not true. I did buy one thing because I knew I wanted it and it was on sale, but I didn't buy anything I didn't need.
That's my excuse. If the husband's watching, that's exactly what I said as well, by the way. And I have been monitoring the pair of boots, and they were genuinely 50% off, because there's not stands out. In any case, we're not the only two, Barbara. Black Friday splurges is set to hit 8.7 billion. Shoppers are spending a staggering 8.7 billion over the weekend, or that's 2.63 million a minute. This is early analysis from Nationwide Building Society that says that actually, despite the cost of living crisis, people have saved up and people are now buying things in preparation for Christmas, which is what Black Friday is about. The biggest sellers at the moment are toys, air fryers and earphones. And John Lewis is selling an item of knitwear at a rate of 1 every 30 seconds.
Goodness.
So we are all going shopping, and joking aside, this is an American import, and most of us find it slightly irritating. And you can't pick up your phone at the moment this weekend, can you? Without saying Black Friday, buy this, buy that.
And then it goes into Cyber Monday.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of pressure on people, and it is an American import. However, it is also good news for the high street.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, that this story kind of presents this as, people are recovering their sort of consumer confidence, but it could be that people have really delayed making purchases because they're aware that there will be better bargains.
Yeah.
And people are thinking, well, because of the cost of living crisis, I will wait, rather than it's being presented as, we're all saying, who cares
If you're
about
on the
cost
bright
of
side,
living crisis?
I'm a half.
We'll see.
Yeah,
what the
absolutely.
figures are like after
Going to go out and
Christmas.
buy a new jumper.
Shona, let's look at the Express, pages 12 and 13, a story that we have been talking about here on Sky News, obviously, the unrest in Dublin.
Yeah, I mean, really, really horrifying scenes. I actually have a friend in Ireland who I was discussing this with, and what's quite interesting in the papers today, the Telegraph has some coverage, the Times as well, is sort of maybe what's not being said about the broader context of this. There's an interesting quote from the Garda police commissioner saying, "We could not have anticipated that in response to a terrible crime, the stabbing of school children and their teacher, this would be the response." And I've seen some commentators say, well, actually, you could have anticipated this if you'd been in those WhatsApp groups, if you'd been monitoring what people were saying. So basically what happened, there was this, as people will know, horrific attack by a man on some children and their teachers or support workers. And then very soon after news broke about this, these groups seemed to mobilise. They were ready. They were waiting to do something to express an anti-immigrant sentiment. Ironically, it was an immigrant man, a man from Brazil, who intervened and used his motorcycle helmet to push this man to the ground and to stop the attack. But yeah, what's not maybe mentioned, and maybe that's a deliberate editorial decision, is that in recent weeks there have been 2 sentencings of people who are not of Irish birth who were convicted of murder. And so that's why these groups have kind of sprung up. Now, obviously, the response of rioting, of destroying your own public transport, your own shops, your own city centres is completely irrational. And obviously the Express, not one to shy away from anti-immigrant sentiment, is portraying this as sort of mad and crazy right-wing extremism without perhaps situating it in this context, not to justify it, but to explain that actually maybe the police could have been anticipating something like this happening.
Yeah. It's just incredibly sad, isn't it? And that poor little girl is a 5-year-old, isn't she?
Yeah.
She was stabbed.
So, Shona, we had 2 lighter stories, wine bottle for £3.49 and a wonky Christmas tree, but we're going to have to leave it for the next hour.
Oh, sorry.
I know, but we will get to that. Dawn, Shona, thank you so much. Now,